I'm going to be really vulnerable with you. This week, I would like to produce a synopsis. And by that, I mean people suck. Probably not supposed to do this. My publisher hasn't even signed this off. There we go. I've told you now. Big announcement. Womp womp. So it's looking a little different in here at the moment. Bookshelves are empty. There's no fairy lights anywhere. I'm using this microphone because otherwise the audio in this room is now horrible. It's so echoey. I am actually swapping offices with my partner. Essentially, I'm going to be splitting my stuff into 2 separate rooms. We've got another really tiny room that has been used for storage up until this point, and we finally cleared it. So that's going to be used as like a hobby room, and it's where the big day bed that was in my office is going to go. And then I'm going to take over his office, which is smaller, and that's where my books and my desk will go. And the reason I've started doing that right now is the same reason as to why we're going to start planning a book together. And that is because I am currently waiting on a structural edit from my publisher. If you haven't seen any of my most recent videos, 2 weeks ago as of filming this, I turned in the draft of what will be my 4th published novel to my publisher. So I call that SP4 because it'll be the 4th book that I publish as Sam Parks. I turned SP4 into my publisher on the 20th of January. It's now the 2nd of February. So for the last couple of weeks, I have been turning my attention to SP5. I obviously am not going to start to write SP5 at this moment because I will have edits coming back on SP4 that I will need to do. But because I set myself the quite ambitious goal of wanting to write and edit 2 books this year, I need to start thinking about SP5 now. So my goal for myself is that before my edits come back in mid-Feb, and in fact, this week, I would like to produce a synopsis for SP5. It won't be set in stone, like things can change when I start the drafting process, but I want to be really clear about where I want to take the story so that I can hit the ground running when I do start drafting, which will be shortly after I finish the edits for SP4. And this coincides really nicely with an event that's happening today, which is what we're going to do together today. And that is the Reedsy online conference, How to Plan Your Novel. They are doing this like event series this year that's like every other month. They've got a half-day online event around a certain topic. This month it is How to Plan Your Novel, which coincides very nicely with my goals. I'm really excited for the next one in April, which is novel revision, and I'll be working on SP4 edits at that time, so that'll be a really helpful one for me then. But for now, we're gonna do How to Plan Your Novel together. I've got my notebook that I'm using. Oh, I'm very color coordinated today. Hello, purple. And I do also have a couple of like mundane tasks that I can do whilst I'm watching the event. I don't have, my desk setup is like, I've taken everything down. So I normally have like a second monitor and stuff, and I just don't at the moment. So all this like pile of junk, that is the mundane task that I have. It's just stuff that needs to be input into my Notion. I've got this flash drive. I don't know what's on it. I need to figure out what's on it. Yeah, just a bunch of stuff like that I just need to like input and doesn't take any actual attention. So I can do that whilst I'm watching the event. It's going to be from 4 to 8 p.m. my time in the UK. I think it's 11 to 3 Eastern time. It's going to be made up of 4 sessions. So one starting on the hour every hour, running for 45 minutes, and then 15-minute breaks in between. So the first one is 5 things to plan before you start writing. Really excited because that is with Tom Bromley, who did the How to Write a Novel course that I took last year, also through Reedsy. So that should be really good. Then the next one after that is Plot Like a Pro, the 3 core elements of story structure with a developmental editor. Then there's a panel discussion with 3 authors talking about their best plotting tactics. And then the last one is a Q&A. Tomorrow, we'll sit down and put into practice some of the things that I learned today. Like I said, this is going to run from 4 to 8 p.m. I'll catch up with you sort of in between each session, tell you how it got on, show you a little bit of watching them. I'm obviously not going to show you a ton of the actual session content, and then obviously you'll get to see how I put it into practice. It's 3:34 at the moment, so I've got about 25 minutes until the first event starts. I am trying to get my driving license in the UK. I've been driving since I was 15 years old in the US, but I've never gotten my UK driving license, and it is time this year. It is time. So I have my theory test on Saturday, so in like 6 days. So in the next 25 minutes, I'm going to figure out how to log into the event, and then I'm going to take a practice theory test. Let's see how I do.
storm, I'm standing in the eye. When it rains, it pours, and you sure know how to make me cry. Thank God for the moon and how she lights up the sky tonight. You may think that you've lost me already. I feel that you.
Tomorrow I'll go through some of these insights because I think that they will impact the way that I approach this planning. But I think one thing in particular that will come into play this week as we're plotting is around stress testing causality. So the way that you set up your story, that should be the only order in which those events could happen. Everything should be impacted by everything that's upstream of it and should impact everything that's downstream of it. He also made a really good point about, like, people talk about focus on plot versus focus on character, especially when you look at like literary versus commercial fiction. But he was basically saying those two are symbiotic, like you can't really have one without the other. But if you're gonna focus on one thing first, it's to focus on the character first, because the plot will change based on your character. Different characters would respond to external stimuli differently, and that's gonna create a different plot. So we'll definitely be incorporating some character work into this vlog. The next session starts in about 4 minutes. And that's the Plot Like a Pro, 3 core elements of story structure with an editor named Alyssa Matesic. So that one was really interesting because it was with a developmental editor, and she was talking about some of the like questions that she will ask the authors that she's working with in order to help them hone their plots. And so that was really good. There were sort of 5 key questions, 3 core elements. It was a very structured presentation. I did end up asking a question, as you might have seen, and got a really helpful answer. So yeah, lots of stuff that we'll be taking forward into our planning this week. And also a lot of stuff that ties in really nicely with Tom's session. Yeah, next session is, let's see. Oh, next session is the author panel. So that's exciting. I'm also hoping I will be brought dinner during this hour. Let's do the next session. That author panel was so interesting, so good. What a treat to have those 3 authors. There were a few things that were really validating to hear. Like, I talk a lot about outlining, and I've shared on my platform and in, talks that I've done multiple times, that the further along in your career you get, the more crucial outlining becomes. And these 3 writers definitely were validating that. We're saying the same thing, that you can't be a full-on pantser if you're going to write prolifically. There were a couple of really specific insights that I got from that, which I will share with you tomorrow when we go through everything, just because I think I'm about to be brought dinner and I do need to jump onto the next session in a couple of minutes as well. But that was fantastic. And I did also get a lot done. I'm not quite done with all of my admin, but I'm going to finish it during the editor Q&A. It's next, and that's going to be the final session. Just finished the last session. There were some great insights from that one too. I'm going to share them with you tomorrow because I am exhausted. I have realized I don't like sitting in this room with nothing in it. Like, it feels very weird and empty. I mean, it is very weird and empty, but like, it feels very empty. If I had ever considered becoming a minimalist, this would have cured me. Good morning. Okay, we are back in the depressingly empty office so that I can tell you about last night. I'll go through some of the key sort of insights from each of the sessions. So first up, like I said, we had Tom's session, and this was about the 5 things you need to think about before you start writing. And those 5 things were pitch, protagonist, POV, place, and pace. So a few insights from Tom's session that I wrote down. There's a reason that you start with pitch, and that's because you might have a seed of a character idea, or you might have a seed of a setting idea or conflict idea, but until you have the pitch, you don't actually have a story, and you can kind of expand from there. And he says that your pitch should center on conflict and should communicate change or potential for change. So your pitch isn't just, this is a person who is like this or who has this attribute. It should also communicate sort of what's standing in the way of what they want. It should communicate what kind of change we're aiming for, and ideally should communicate some sort of like choice or stakes. He talked about the 3 C's, which are change, causality, and complications. He did say that one of the things that you should be doing as you're plotting, if you do plot out the plot, is to stress test causality. And so I really want to take that into this sort of planning for SP5 and maybe into my edits for SP4 as well. When we were talking about obstacles, he said you find out who someone really is when their back's against the wall, and that's true for your characters as well. So give them that back against the wall situation, whatever that means for them in light of their want and their need. Then we had Alyssa's session, and Alyssa is a developmental editor. Some of the key insights from her were her 3 core elements of story development are objective, stakes, and obstacle. You should make sure that your character is actively pursuing what they want. Active being the key word. They're not just waiting for someone to hand it to them. The story starts because they make a choice that leads them to pursue what they want. And then the stakes should be tied to that objective. And you should have both positive and negative stakes. It's not just they want this, and if they don't get it, this will happen. It's also, if they do get it, what will they gain? And that just creates a lot more like urgency and drive. And I find this in romance to be really challenging. And in SP4, once I'm able to share that with you, I think you'll be able to see that that story in particular has a lot better built-in stakes than I think other romances, just because of the nature of the story. But a lot of times in romance, it's like, okay, the what if this doesn't work is like they just don't get together. How can we make that a little bit worse? And if you can't do that, then you need additional wants and needs other than just the romance, that the romance is paralleling. And that's typically what I turn to in my books, is I have different wants and needs. SP4, the stakes are within the romance itself because it just worked out that way. The romance was high stakes enough that it had those inherent positive and negative stakes. Sorry, I just talked a lot about that, but I think it is really important, and it's something I need to think about in planning for SP5, because what are the stakes? I don't know yet. She talked about not just handing things to your characters, making them work for things, having both internal and external obstacles. She gave the formula that this wouldn't be your pitch, but it's a sentence you should be able to complete. Character wants objective because stakes, but obstacle. That's a really easy way to figure out, do you have a story? She talked about prioritizing your conflicts, making sure that you do have a main conflict and then you have sub-conflicts, so that you can make sure that your sub-conflicts aren't distracting from the main conflict, because that's where the story can start to feel convoluted. And keep asking why to drill down on wants and needs. So like basically be like a toddler. Be like, but why? But why? Okay, she wants that, but why? Well, because of this. But why is that important? Well, because if not, then this. But why is that bad? Just keep drilling down until you get as fundamental as you can. The third session was the author panel, and there were some fantastic authors, including Caroline Levitt, which was very exciting, but it was very good to hear. Again, very validating. Caroline Levitt was talking about how she plots with the Truby system, kind of. She's changed it to something called her Wants and Needs Bible, which they talked about as if that resource exists somewhere on Reedsy, so I'm going to go hunting for that, and we'll do that together in a bit. She also talked about how writers are canaries in the coal mines, where it's sort of the author's responsibility to go to dark places with their characters so that readers can get a glimpse of that and get a taste of what's driving the story without having to go all the way there themselves. I thought that was really interesting to think about, because we do, as writers, we go through so many things for the sake of working out a story, working out a character arc. Even if we're not experiencing them in our lives, we have to psychologically process them in order to communicate them in a story and to create character arcs in accordance with them. And then one of the other authors, Andy, said, just because you've learned it doesn't mean it's needed. Oh, this was about world building and like detail, because he does crime writing, for example. So he's like learning what kind of metal they use in certain guns and things like that. And He said, just because you've learned it doesn't mean it's needed. You're writing a story, not a Wikipedia page. And then the last one was the editor Q&A, which was with 3 Reedsy editors who are also have been editors in other contexts. And they were answering questions that everyone submitted. And it was really interesting to see how everyone was using that session to kind of validate and affirm their understanding of what they'd learned in the previous sessions, kind of articulating those learnings back and asking them, like, is this right? But some of the notes that I took from that, there were tons of good insights, but again, some of them were validating of other things I've already talked about. So other sort of new insights that I wrote down, again, on world building, because there were quite a few questions about world building. Good world building is nothing compared to character and means nothing without it. So you could have the richest world there is, but if your characters aren't hooking people, the story's not going to go anywhere. And similarly, if you have really strong characters, but the world building is weak, your story will still have legs. And also just anecdotally, like my insertion of that, I think it's a lot easier to add in world building elements after the fact than it is to add in character stuff after the fact. What information does your reader need right now? It's never everything all at once. So this was about kind of info dumps and making sure that you're drip fitting information. I understand as an author how it can be really tempting to like drop in every kind of relevant piece of lore as early as possible, because when that becomes relevant, you don't want readers to be like, well, that came out of nowhere. How convenient. Like I remember reading a book, it kills me that I don't do negative reviews on this channel anymore because I really want to tell you what book I was reading, where it was so annoying. It was a fantasy book and I DNF'd it within 100 pages because every page was a new skill that this heroine had learned. All of a sudden she could climb a castle wall. All of a sudden she was great at close combat. All of a sudden she was like great with poisons. Oh, by the way, she can like maybe teleport. It was ridiculous. And each of those things was only revealed when it became convenient for the story. And I think as a writer, you really want to avoid that. And so the temptation is then to just dump everything right at the beginning in order to seed that stuff. And I think it is a really tricky balance because I agree that like you want to withhold information until it's needed for your reader. But I think when it's needed for your reader and when it's immediately relevant for the story are two different things. Sometimes it is needed for your reader earlier than it's needed for the immediate action of the story, simply because you want to create that sort of seeding effect. Does that make sense? We talked a little bit about tropes, and they did talk specifically about romance within that conversation, but they were also talking about fantasy, science fiction, all of that. But the advice across the board is that what makes tropes feel fresh is the characters involved. And that's especially true in romance, I feel, because your characters are the story. Their relationship is the story. And therefore, if those characters feel fresh and they feel real and they feel fleshed out, the tropes will feel fresh as well. And also because they'll be well motivated. The tropes that you're leaning into should make sense for the characters that you've created. And again, that goes back to what Tom was saying about why you put character before plot. Because there are some characters, for example, that would never in a million years find themselves in a fake dating trope. And then there are some characters that might think that they would never find themselves in a fake dating trope, but lo and behold, the situation presents itself and they're like, oh, that would be really convenient. And then there are some that would be like, yes, I love a fake dating trope. This is so chaotic and messy. Let's do it. So you need to know who your characters are in order to understand what tropes are going to be feasible and believable within their story. And then that character needs to be fleshed out enough that the playing out of that trope is unique because of the character that you bring to it. And then finally, plot twists should be unexpected yet inevitable. Plot twists that come out of nowhere, not good. One of the editors was talking about how she read a book by a very famous author recently. She told us what book it was, which rude, but I understand based on the plot twist she was describing. I'm not going to do that to you. But apparently there was a very, very popular book by a very, very popular author that she was reading within the last couple of years that at the end it was all a dream. And she was really annoyed by that. Stuff like that you don't want to do. But a plot twist that in hindsight is like, of course it was that. Those are the good ones. Those are the good twists. And I think that requires some sort of foresight. I'm sure you could pants your way into one, but I think you'd be very lucky to do so. Anyway, those are the insights from sessions. What I want to do is I just want to start with the 3 core elements Alyssa talked about: objective, stakes, obstacle, because I was thinking about it, and so this is a romance, can be dual point of view. For the book I'm planning, SP5, I know one of my characters very well. I don't really know the other one very well. So I need to know that one, I need to know that need, and tied to each of those, I need to know the stakes. The character that I'm going to be thinking about is called Teddy, and I need to think about, what does Teddy want? What does Teddy need? And what is at stake? There's a term that gets thrown around a lot in like writing groups. Maybe it's just my writing group, which is latent processing. And it's the same if you've ever heard the advice that like you do your best thinking in the shower, or when you're like washing the dishes, or when you're out on a walk. It's this idea that like moving your body or doing something physical can allow the wheels to turn mentally and creatively. And also just like having something in the back of your mind for an extended period. I don't have an extended period because I'm doing outlining starting tomorrow, but I do need to start on this room. I need to pull all the nails out of the walls, put polyfilla on the holes that have been created. And I also need to touch up the trim where I was very bad with this green paint a couple of years ago. And I am going to be very brave and not listen to an audiobook while I do this room, because that would distract me from my latent processing. So instead, I'm going to just put on some music. So let's do some latent processing.
Laid under the willow tree, the last weekend of summer, the empire at our fingertips, the autumn to discover. If I would have had the worthiness to be the perfect lover, would you stay under the willow tree when I asked if you would be? Would you be?
Tomorrow, I'm going to prime the walls. It's going to need 2 coats of primer, cover the green, and then just 1 coat of the color. So, as planned, I've been thinking about, what does Teddy want, what does Teddy need, and what are the stakes? I've gotten pretty far with the want. In terms of what Teddy needs, this is a romance, so it can be tempting to just be like, they need a good relationship that honors who they are as a person. But that feels like a cop-out to me, and I don't know why. Maybe that's fine, but to me, I feel like I want it to be a little bit more than that, and I'm struggling a bit more with that one. The best I've come up with is like, Teddy needs something to run towards instead of just running from, but does that feel a bit cliche? And I also need to make sure that the love interest is not the thing that Teddy ends up running towards. Yes, of course they will run towards each other, but I need there to be something else. Does that make sense? This all sounds very abstract, and I like a really practical, realistic romance, so I am kind of struggling with this. But I can see in my head with the scene ideas that I have how that will translate into a story and how that can come out. And really the other character is the one that I want to have the more externally obvious character arc. Teddy's going to be the grump to the grumpy sunshine. And so it's okay if Teddy's character arc is a little bit more internal. Because I've done all of this already, I've actually got a little bit more time this evening. So what I want to do this evening is I'm going to sit down. Like I said, I'm going to try to find the Caroline Leavitt Wants and Needs Bible, and I'm going to try to fill that out for both characters. I'm struggling with how much of this to show you. Can I even tell you why? There's a reason. I don't give a shit. It's the other character is a side character in You've Got Chainmail. I'm working on another standalone in the same world as You've Got Chainmail. That's what SP4 is as well. There you go. Big announcement. Womp womp. You've Got Chainmail is getting to not sequels because they're each going to operate as standalones, but companion novels. Kind of the way like the Abby Jimenez novels have worked. SP4 is about Phil and Amy. If you've read You've Got Chainmail, you know who those people are. SP5 is about Chloe and Teddy. So there we go. I've told you now. And so I don't have to beat around the bush when I'm doing the character work later. And that is why I'm so in touch with Chloe's wants and needs already, because I've written 2 books with her in them. Teddy is the one that I've needed to get my head around even more. That's what I'm going to do later tonight. But for now, I'm going to go take another practice driving test and hazard test. I did ones this morning and I got a perfect score on the theory test practice. So just saying, I'm gonna drink the rest of my tea and practice my driving tests. Okay, so I've just finished my plotting. I did find the Caroline Leavitt Wants and Needs Bible. Hers were the want, the misconception, action, the we're all doomed moment, the realization, and starting fresh. So the idea here is that the want is obviously what the character wants, their objective. The misconception, what is the lie that they believe? The action, so what are the actual actions that they take in the story to try to achieve their objective. We're all doomed moment is like the all is lost moment. The realization, which is what is the truth that they uncover, and then starting fresh, what is the resolution? So can you see how that's like mapping out the character arc, kind of? I actually really like that structure. I have added a couple of things in there. So I've done the want, and then I've added what's at stake, both the positive and negative, then the misconception, action, and then what spooks them. So they're taking action. What is the thing that spooks them? What is the inciting incident to the all is lost moment? Because I think that understanding what is going to trigger that in them is a helpful thing to have. That's something that I think could change as I write the story, or especially as I plot the story, but I think it's useful to have. Then the we're all doomed, all is lost moment, the realization, and starting fresh. So I've now got 8 points in mine. And I thought this was really, really useful. As expected, Chloe's was really easy to do. Teddy's was a little bit more difficult to do, but it was really good because I now have a really clear idea of what the, I guess, milestones in her character arc need to look like. Like, where's she at the beginning? This whole thing has made me realize who her kind of like mentor figure needs to be, what her resolution needs to be, all of that. So that's been really, really helpful. And I feel like that's probably enough character work for me to do before I start plotting tomorrow. I will want to do some more character work when I start drafting, just to better understand like their tone and stuff like that. But I think that in terms of being able to figure out the plot, I've got everything that I need. So the plan now is for the next 2 days, we're going to do my progressive outlining method. If you've not heard me talk about this before, basically this is a method that I developed, which takes popular outlining structures and has you fill them out in sort of increasing complexity. And then at the end, you take the parts of the different outlines that work best for you and the articulation of different plot points that make the most sense for your story, and you turn it into like a Franken outline, as in you Frankenstein it together. And that becomes the outline that you work from. So I need to create my Franken outline to write my synopsis from. So over the next 2 to 3 days, we're going to do that progressive outlining. And then on Thursday or Friday, whenever we've finished all that outlining, then we'll turn that into a synopsis. I think this is going very well. I'm very pleased with this.
Faster than the speed of light, we stretch time. Snare drum pass, wicked sins.
I will truly never learn my lesson. Facebook Marketplace sucks. And by that I mean people suck. The entire afternoon has gotten away from me. It's like 3:45. The second time today, when people were meant to be coming to pick up something that we're getting rid of in this office shuffle. And now they're not coming. And they told us 2 minutes ago. So that's fun. So it's almost 4 o'clock and I've done no writing work. Helpfully, my partner is going to do the second coat of priming tonight because apparently it only takes a few hours for it to dry all the way. We're going to get fish and chips for dinner so that I can focus on writing. So I'm going to make myself a cup of tea and then let's get started. Okay, we're going to do progressive outlining and I am going to start from the template that I have on my website. This is free. You don't have to sign up to my marketing list to get it. You do have to enter your email. If you felt like signing up to my newsletter, I wouldn't be mad, but you don't have to. I'll put a link in the description. What I'll also put a link to is a video that's like an hour long of me explaining this. I did a talk at the Bournemouth Writing Festival in April about how to do this progressive outlining method. Went through it in detail, talked about why it's important, why it works. We're gonna go through it today. Like I said before, we're trying to start really focused and then expand as we go. So we start with the one-page method, which we basically treat as a brain dump. The start, the end, everything in between, maybe try to arrange it, just using that as a brain dump for like scene ideas, plot points to happen. This isn't necessarily respective of character arc, though important character arc moments, of course, should be included if you already know what they are. From there, we then distill that into the story spine, which is literally once upon a time, where you introduce your who and where. Every day, insert status quo. But one day, inciting incident, because of that, because of that, because of that. So again, thinking about all your causality, but only 3 times, only 3 key evolutions of that, until finally, and ever since then. So you can see how it's forcing you to distill your big brain dump down into a much more streamlined story presentation. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna start with my brain dump, and I'll let you know how that goes. I have got my cup of tea. I'm going to put on some music. Actually, I'm going to put on like a YouTube ambiance video, and we'll do that. This is harder than I thought. I thought that I had tons of ideas for the plot, but it turns out I have tons of ideas for very small portions of the plot. So what I would do in this situation, and this is what the progressive outlining is for. This is what it's for. This is just a brain dump. It doesn't have to be complete. So I'm going to proceed to the next bit, even though I've probably only got enough plot for 60% of the story. Point of this progressive outlining is that it's going to give me what are the beats, what are the things that need to be happening to bridge the gap. So I'm gonna move on to the other steps of the progressive outlining. I'm going to trust my own process here. The next bit, like I said, is the story spine, where it's focusing on really distilling it down into key points and focusing on causality. So I'm going to do that. But first, I've just found out my husband's going to be stuck in traffic for a while. So I actually need to go to the fish and chips van myself to get some food. Is it raining? Yes, but I need to eat. And then we will do the story spine. So the problem that I'm having at the moment is that my mind is flooded with ideas for SP6. Lying in bed last night, I had a little bit of a brainwave about what that would be. And it's all I can think about while I'm doing this. I'm having to actively force myself to stop thinking about that and to think about this instead. So I finished the story spine. I don't know that I'm 100% happy with it. And I want to kind of think on it a little bit before I move on to the next progressive outlining steps, simply because I think the like catharsis sort of wake up moment just before the grand gesture portion of this story, I'm not super happy with that. And I need to be super happy with that and what that's going to be, what that cornerstone of the story is going to be, in order to feel like I'm hitting all the points for both of their character arcs. So I need to think about that a little bit more. I'm going to do some of our lovely latent processing again with the prompt for each of them individually. What triggers their mindset shift that's necessary for the end of the story to occur? What are the things in her life that would push her to have that kind of emotional transformation? What are the things that she would turn to in her darkest moments that would allow for catharsis? That's what I need to answer. Latent processing. What am I going to do? Because I don't want to crochet. My hands are a bit sore from priming, actually. So instead, I think I'm going to play some solo Scrabble. I got this game as a gift several months ago that I haven't actually played yet, which is meant to be like, solo Scrabble is probably wrong. I think it's meant to be like solo crossword or solo bananagrams type of vibe. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. Good morning. Barely. It's like 11 o'clock. I had a little bit of a brainwave overnight, I guess, where I realized what my sort of catharsis moment should be. Not just for Teddy, but for Chloe as well, actually, that the same thing, I think, is going to be what brings the catharsis for both of them. So I have revised the story spine, and I have started on, I've actually done the 3-act structure and the 4-act structure. So let me talk you through what that looks like. The 3-act structure is obviously Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, but then within each of those, you have sort of sub points. And then the 4-act structure is broken up into 4 acts. obviously, as the name implies. Act 1 is hook, inciting incident, key event. Act 2 is character develops a new strategy to deal with the interruption, so you just have a bunch of plot points under that. Act 3 is the character's strategy fails miserably. And Act 4 is character develops a better strategy that works, and so you have climax, climactic moment, and resolution. Normally when I'm doing this, I find that one or the other of these two speaks better to me for the story. I mean, the point of going through this progressive outlining is that you are trying all of these and that some will speak more to you than others, or parts of some will speak more to you than others. For this particular story, I'm finding both of these are working really, really well, which is why we have the Franken outline at the end that pulls together the best bits of all of the structures. So I found both of these really, really helpful. I'm still filling out the 4-act structure, but I think this articulation of character develops a new strategy to deal with interruption and then character strategy fails miserably, I think works really well for the kind of romance that I'm looking at telling, because it's sort of a rivals to lovers romance where one of the characters has sworn off romance in an attempt to figure something out. And so character develops a new strategy to deal with the interruption is like the swearing off, trying to keep at arm's length, leaning into the rivalry, and then the character strategy fails miserably is obviously the getting together, and the midpoint goes between that sort of Act 2 and Act 3. So I'm finding this really interesting. I don't know if that will make any sense. If you've seen the template, you will know what I'm talking about. Just trust me that it's working really nicely. So I'm going to finish this 4-act structure. The next one that I need to do is Hero's Journey. And just looking through the points in the hero's journey, which is kind of a 3-act structure, but like, again, has more specific beats that you're trying to define, there are a lot of these that I think are going to work really nicely for this story as well. This is really validating to me because it means that the story's got legs. I think the insights from the Reedsy session earlier in the week, combined with this progressive outlining template, is making me feel a lot better about the story. And I think letting myself think a bit more yesterday about the SP6 ideas that I have was a good call, because I've kind of gotten that out of my brain now and I can focus more on the task in front of me. So I'm going to finish the 4-act structure, then I'm going to do Hero's Journey, and I'm going to do Dan Harmon's Story Circle. It's like a distilled version of the Hero's Journey, this story circle. I'm going to save the Cat, Romancing the Beat, and Take Off Your Pants until later, because I need to do the painting today. So if I do 4-act structure, Hero's Journey, and Story Circle before the painting, then I can use the painting time to kind of think about anything that I need to think about in order to do those more complicated ones. Because Save the Cat, Romancing the Beat, and Take Off Your Pants are by far the most complex, and also I usually find the most demanding in terms of forcing me to come up with things and forcing me to create ideas from scratch. So having that kind of break to do something physical, I think, will be really helpful. Okay, the room is painted. I am showered. I've eaten dinner as well. The afternoon kind of got away from me. You know, when you like get out of the shower and then you sit there and kind of just stare into the abyss for ever. I might have stared a little bit too hard. I spent like 30-40 minutes just sat on the edge of my bed. But it's fine. We're here now. I'm gonna do the next few iterations of the progressive outlining, and then tomorrow we'll do the Franken outlining. And I feel really good about it. I was thinking about the story a lot while I was working this afternoon, and I think that's the first time in this whole process that this story has felt front and center in my mind. For a while, it was that I couldn't get SP4 out of my head, all the edits that I want to make to it. And then, of course, yesterday, I just couldn't stop thinking about SP6, whereas today, this was all that was in the forefront of my mind. So I'm excited to sit down and to go through some of these more complex outlining methodologies. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to do those 3. This is, I think, going to take me a little while. So I'm going to get it started now because I'd love to get all 3 of these done before I get too tired and need to go to bed. I did that so much faster than I thought I would. Romancing the Beat is always super hit or miss for me. Sometimes it really just makes sense for the story, and sometimes it really doesn't. In this case, it did. I'm going to be using so much of that in my Franken outline already. I know it. So similar to how I said that the 3-act structure or the 4-act structure usually works for me, one or the other. It's also usually that way with Romancing the Bee and Take Off Your Pants. And in this instance, Take Off Your Pants felt less helpful to me. What Take Off Your Pants nails in a way that some of the others don't is this sort of like repetitive structure. So I'll put it up on the screen now, but there's like beats that kind of repeat themselves. And Romancing the Beat does that a little bit, but I think that Take Off Your Pants kind of illustrates that escalation. And this isn't explicitly stated within the beat structure, but the implication there is that each of those repetitions is escalating in terms of stakes and urgency and sort of a heightened emotional state between the characters. That was helpful. So what's the next step of this? Like I said, we're going to create the Franken outline tomorrow, which means I'm going to look at all of these outlines that I've created, and I'm going to put together a sort of composite outline that pulls language from all of these different places. And while I won't share the full outline with you because that would spoil the story, I will share my beats from my Franken outline when I do that tomorrow. So we'll do that together. And that way you can see what I mean about it being sort of a composite Franken outline situation. But for now, because I did that faster than I thought I would, but I am sort of creatively tapped out for the day, I am going to watch something that I've been wanting to watch, which is Popstar Academy, and then I'm going to go to bed, and tomorrow we will do some Franken outlining.
Training program. Keep going this time. Yeah, we're in this to become a sensational, iconic global program.
Good morning. So I've just had breakfast and done some more practice driving tests. I got 72 out of 75 on my hazard perception, and I got 49 out of 50 on the mock theory test. So I'm feeling really good about that, which is good because my test is in 2 days. But for now, I'm very excited to start compiling my Franken outline. Again, it's just been like playing on my mind since I stopped yesterday, which is such a good sign for me. I love when I get like obsessed with a project. That's always like the ultimate sign that I'm doing something right. I am having to wear my compression glove that I have for crochet because my hand is so sore from all the painting and priming. And unfortunately, I do have to do more today because having done all the painting, it's clear that the trim is just awful. Basically, the previous owners had painted the like crown molding or the upper trim a white, and the door and the bottom trim are an awful like cream color that's now darker than the walls. So I need to paint all of that, but I'm going to do that later because like I said, it's been on my mind. And so first thing this morning, I want to work on this Franken outline. So as I told you, well, just a minute ago for you, but yesterday for me, I'm going to be taking apart all these other outline structures and cobbling them together in a way that makes sense for the story I want to tell. So I need to just spend some time literally just reading through these outlines and seeing what resonates. I like to highlight on the page what is resonating most, and then I will compile that into a new outline. What I really want to do is what we were talking about at the Reedsy event at the beginning of the week, which is stress testing the causality, making sure that this is the only order in which these events could take place in order to make sense for the story. And if not, I need to think about how I'm seeding things in a way that does create that sort of sequential payoff. Okay, so I am finished. It did take me about an hour and a half. The sun is getting very bright in from this side. And I think that I have an outline structure that is going to work. I have stress tested it a bit. Obviously, draft 1 is the ultimate stress test, but I think I'm happy with this. I did have an idea as I was doing this for a B plot that I don't really have in here. Save the Cat is really the only structure here that talks about the B story at all, but I think I want to make sure that I don't detract from the main story, and so I'll try to incorporate the B story. I have tried to incorporate the B story into some of these existing beats rather than adding new beats for the B story, because realistically, and when I was doing my talk at Bournemouth Writing Festival last year, I got this question about multi-POV stories, which was like, okay, if I'm doing this, do I do this for each POV? And the answer is no. Your story has these beats. These beats are not chapters. They are not scenes, your reader experiences the story as a whole. They don't experience it as two separate stories. So whilst, yes, you need to make sure that each of your characters has their POV appropriately represented within this, and you need to make sure that their character arc is represented within it in a way that the sequence and the causality makes sense, you should only have one outline. Your story should only have one list of beats that you are hitting, because that is how your reader is going to experience it. Anyway, without further ado, I want to tell you what my beats are. So I'm doing this a little bit differently because there is a time jump between the initial meet cute and then the main story. So the idea is the main story is taking place, the characters met months before that. So our first beat before we do the character intros is actually meet cute. So we have meet cute, intro H1, intro H2, adhesion plot thrust, drive for goal, thwart number 1, new drive for goal, thwart number 2, new drive for goal / attempted to stray, thwart number 3. So that you can see that drive for goal, thwart number 1, new drive for goal, thwart number 2, new drive for goal, thwart number 3 is from that take off your pants kind of repetition and that escalation. But then I've added in the tempted to stray language from, no, that's from Hero's Journey. Tempted to stray is from Hero's Journey. Technically it says woman is temptress, but I hate that wording, so I've used tempted to stray instead. So new drive for goal / tempted stray, thwart number 3, meeting with the goddess. This is their ally, their mentor. Maybe this will work. Thwart number 4, midpoint of love plot thrust. Then I've got fun and games. This is something that is from Save the Cat, and it typically happens before the midpoint, but I've brought it to after the midpoint because a lot of these outline structures, they have you going from this sort of midpoint of love immediately into things going wrong. And I think I'd like a story beat where things are going right. And yes, of course, there will be like seeds there for the discontent that will stir, but I'd like a fun and games. I think that would be nice, kind of showing these two people at their best together. But then, of course, as the reader, you're able to see that and know it's not gonna last forever. So fun and games. Then we have inkling of doubt, deepening doubt, antagonist attacks, which it's not going to be a traditional like mustache twirling antagonist. It's going to be situational, but I like the idea of the antagonist attacks being a metaphor for like external forces that will then stir up those internal conflicts and obstacles. So deepening doubt, antagonist attacks, breakup, dark night of the soul, wake up / catharsis, rescue from without. This isn't obviously rescue, but this is kind of a parallel to that meeting with the goddess. So sort of help from an ally. Then grand gesture, and then what wholehearted looks like. And those are my beats. Now, because this is within the same universe as You've Got Chainmail, it is going to follow the same structure as You've Got Chainmail, which, if you've not read that, basically this group of friends, they play Dungeons and Dragons together. And so there are really, really, really short interludes in between some of the chapters, not all of them, but some of them, which are their D&D games written out as fantasy. And so it's their characters that they're playing who are trying to achieve the mission, but you're also seeing the personalities of the people playing these characters come out in the fantasy sections. And it's worth noting that that is not reflected in this beat sheet. Those will be added in between these where it makes sense, both within the context of like when in the story are they playing D&D, because I like to insert it. Like if I say they're, getting ready to sit around the table in order to play, then we might have an interlude chapter next. But also in terms of where it makes sense to push the character development. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying, which is the things that are happening in these interlude chapters, whilst that is a self-contained story, because even within their world, it's fictional, it's not actually happening, it should still be impacting the reader's appreciation of the main story, and vice versa. What they know about what's happening in the main story should impact their appreciation of what's happening in the D&D sections. So I will add that in. I tend to add that in after having written everything. The reason that I do that is because, one, as I'm writing the main story, that is when I tend to have ideas about like what would be good parallels to pull into the other story. And then those moments that I need to make happen, that will inform what the the wider sort of mission or plot of that sub-story is going to be. But I want to make sure that the story is like complete and self-contained on its own before I start adding those in. So anyway, that is my plan. In terms of what I'm going to do next in this vlog, other than painting trim later and finishing this docu-series that I started last night because I am obsessed with it, tomorrow I'm going to take this Franken outline and I'm going to turn it into a synopsis. But in the meantime, I'm going to rest my hand and watch a bit of Netflix because I've earned it.
Would you be my Valentine? Would you be my Valentine? Still I love
Good morning. It's a bit earlier than I'm usually up and at it. It's about 7:45 because we had someone come to pick something up from Facebook Marketplace. But I am definitely ready to start writing my synopsis. What I really want to do is think about it the way that we talked about on the Reedsy event, where you kind of start with your pitch and then work out from there. So I'm going to use that framework that was given: character wants, objective because stakes, but obstacle. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to have to tweak it slightly because I obviously have two main characters, but I'm going to start with that and then I'm going to work out from there. All right, I'm going to be really vulnerable with you and share a first draft. This isn't a synopsis because it doesn't really go into the plot, but it's longer than a pitch. It's certainly longer than that sentence that I was starting with. I would say this is like a long blurb. This is the first draft. I've done no revision, but I'm sharing it with you anyway because I've seen a lot of videos lately and listened to a podcast episode as well of people complaining that authors on AuthorTube never share details of what they're working on. So I'm sharing it with you. I don't care. Probably not supposed to do this. My publisher hasn't even signed this off, so all subject to change. Fiery life of the party Chloe is bored as hell. She has 4 months to figure out what she wants to do with her life before her work sabbatical ends. Desperate to find her place in a world where all her friends are pairing off, she decides to swear off women and throw herself headfirst into her passion by taking a job at a local meadery. Introverted nomad Teddy is working on her aunt's honey farm in Wales for the summer, desperate to build a life for herself away from the people who hurt her. But the immigration process is a bitch, and overqualified Teddy will have to work extra hard to make it happen. Months after a rocky first encounter, Teddy and Chloe find themselves vying for the same position. Teddy is determined to edge Chloe out so she can secure her future, and Chloe is desperate to keep Teddy at arm's length to avoid becoming emotionally involved. But as the two are stuck working side by side for the summer to grow the meadery, they find it harder and harder to stay out of trouble and out of each other's business. So that's not good, but that's roughly what the story is about. So now I need to work on turning that into a synopsis. Let's do that now. And I'm done. Synopsis is complete. Obviously, I still need to edit this, but I think I'm going to do that after SP4 edit. I think I'm happy with this as it is. I've now spent a couple of hours with it after writing it. Don't go anywhere yet though, because I have my driving test tomorrow and I'm gonna let you know how I did. And also that room that I've been painting, I'm gonna be moving things into this weekend so you can see that as well. It's gonna be like 10 seconds. I'll just quickly show you the results of everything you've been watching me do. I hope that this was helpful, that it was interesting to see how I go about planning this, maybe to learn a little bit about my outlining process. I will leave links in the description to the talk that I did at Bournemouth Writing Festival, as well as the Reedsy event series. Obviously, the How to Plan Your Novel one is already passed, but like I said, the next one is Novel Revision. Those are affiliate links. I'm a proud Reedsy affiliate, but I'm really excited about that event series, so I hope you'll join me. And without further ado, let's cut to Future Sam to see how I do on the test and how the room looks.
Fast